Hey everyone, this is Christopher Brower here with Daily Motor, and boy am I excited for today's video, because over here on my right we have my personal first generation 2003 Lexus IS 300, and over here on my left we have the current generation 2022 Lexus IS 350 F Sport all-wheel drive, and today we're going to compare them and see how far the Lexus IS has come over the past, well, this came out in 2001, this is 2022, so 22 years? The IS has been around for quite a while now, but it has changed in many, many ways. Sure, it's still a sports sedan, but as you can see from this crazy design language on this current car and this very simple, elegant, classy design language on the first generation car, their market has changed, the world has changed in the past 20 or so years. So today we're going to talk about some of the differences, some of the similarities. We'll take both cars out for a drive, see how they drive on the road, compare them, and then at the end I'll give you my thoughts on, well, what should you do? Should you buy 4 first generation IS 300s or should you buy 1 brand new IS 300? Honestly though, there won't be too much buying advice because nobody's really going to be cross-shopping these. This is really just to show you how far this car has come over the past 20 or so years. So let's talk about powertrains. In fact, let's pop both hoods and take a look at what's under them. I can tell you straight away, the biggest difference is the first generation car has an inline 6, better known to all of you nerds as the 2JZ GE, naturally aspirated, 215 horsepower, and that is sent to only the rear wheels in the first generation car. Let's take a look at the new car. Very similar feeling hood pops. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if it was like the same exact part. Just a very generic looking engine cover on this, but pretty attractive. So under the hood of this new car, we have Lexus's 3.5 liter naturally aspirated V6 that makes 311 horsepower. So 96 more horsepower in this new Lexus IS. This is of course the IS 350. You can get the IS 200 or IS 300, whatever the lower trim is of this, with a 2-liter turbo that makes 240 horsepower. So no matter what you get, you will have more power than the first generation car. But I've got to say that I miss the character of inline 6s, of naturally aspirated inline 6s that we used to get in the early 2000s, the 80s, the 90s. I miss that soul, that character that we'd get with these engines. And I really wish Lexus would go back to an inline 6 because you lack some of that soul with the V6. And that's just my opinion. I've never been a real big fan of V6s. I much prefer the inline 6. And boy, is this an iconic engine in this first generation car. I've got 173,000 miles on this thing and it runs like new. Of course, I did replace the timing belt just to keep it up to par where it should be to make sure we don't have any problems. But there you go. There are the engines compared. Let's go ahead, shut the hoods, and we'll do a walk around of both cars so you can see some of the design language and how it has changed over the years. So we'll start with the old one. This was really brought over to fight the E46 BMW 3 Series, a 4-door rear-wheel drive sports sedan. But the appeal of this car is you can have the appeal of an E46 BMW 3 Series without all of the reliability nightmares that those cars had. I know that they were a bit of a more reliable BMW, but Lexus gives you peace of mind, and this car was actually sold in Japan as the Toyota Altezza. It existed for a couple years over there before it came over to the US in 2001 as the IS 300. What makes mine a little bit special is it has a 5-speed manual gearbox. This was offered from 2002 to 2005, so only a few years. The second generation had a manual option as well. I'm not too clear on when that was offered, but only 5% of these first generation cars were made with a manual, so it's a little bit of a unicorn. As far as wheel and tire setups go, I'm running some BBS wheels wrapped in some Bridgestone Potenza Sports. Shout out to Bridgestone for giving me this set of tires to really just enhance the performance here of my IS 300. So as you can see overall, really just a simple, classy, timeless design. This car still looks so good, in my opinion. It's one of my favorite cars ever, and I don't ever plan on selling this. It's just, to me, it is sports sedan perfection. So let's move on to the new car. We can see Lexus's modern design language with this large gaping grille out front and these very sleek headlights. Lots of sharp body lines in this new IS. My favorite part of the new car is the back, this big strip taillight that runs across. And with this being the F Sport package, we do have quite a few sport, different appearance options than you'd get on just a base non-F Sport car. We've got red interior in this thing, quite eccentric. As you can see there, F Sport on the door sills. It's still a classy interior design that you can see some of here. Let me give you a look at this in here, okay? And then let's go over to my car, and you can see some similarities just with the dashboard design, the center stack. The new one is certainly just an evolution of this first generation car, so pretty cool to see. All right, guys, well, I think we've spent enough time walking around these things. Why don't we take both of them out on the road and compare them in a driving sense instead of just standing here in a parking lot. So we're gonna start with the first gen car. We'll take it out for about a 5-minute drive, and then we'll come back and we'll drive the current 2022 IS 350. So I have owned this car since 2016, and since joining forces with Daily Motor and the Topher and Winding Road, it doesn't get much seat time anymore. I did daily drive this car for about 3 years, but over the past couple of years, it has done quite a bit of sitting. As you can see, fires right up. 173,604 miles. We're gonna be trying out the AC for the first time this season, so let's hope that it still blows cold. When I parked it last year, it still did, so let's hope that it does. Just a manual adjust steering column in this car. And as you can see, I do have one warning light, but that should go away as we drive. It's a sensor for the auto leveling headlights, and I just washed this car, and for some reason when the headlights get wet, I get that weird warning light, but I don't worry about it because it does not affect anything. On the inside of this car, I actually have the interior from a sport design, so you couldn't actually get this interior in a white car, but mine is unique in that way. 5-speed manual transmission. This car does have a short throw shifter, so this is not the shifter that would have come in the car. Similar shift knob design though, just a metal ball, which gets extremely hot during the summer and extremely cold during the winter. But my girlfriend knitted me this little hat for it that you can stick on here, and it helps keep your hand cool in all driving conditions. So if that gets too hot, we will go ahead and stick that on. So just to reiterate, under the hood, 3-liter straight six, 215 horsepower. And my favorite part about this powertrain is just all of that low down torque that you have. In third gear, you can be rolling at 2,000 RPM, and this thing will give you lots of delicious torque. We're gonna try to do this whole review without the GoPro overheating. That will be the goal here. Quite a good noise from this 2JZ, you gotta love it. This 03 IS 300, of course, has mechanical power steering, or hydraulic, whatever you want to call it. So it does have a little bit of a heavy feel, but I can appreciate a heavy steering feel now that most new cars, even new sports cars, have some light steering, or sports sedans, as I should say. Okay, the AC is working, but it is not super cold. We shall see if that changes. Might have to crack the windows so we don't overheat in here. Ah, yes. Another thing I love about this old car is just the smallness of it. It's a little bit smaller than the new car, and you can feel that when you drive it. Sports sedans have gotten kind of large, and in my opinion, in the early 2000s, they were the perfect size. And the dimensions of this car, they just work. It's got plenty of room in the back seat, and it's got plenty of room up here as well, and it feels so proper in size and plenty maneuverable. I'm gonna follow the Kia Soul here. We do have a Torsen limited slip differential in the back, which can help you in going around corners. Don't ask me how I know that. But being a teenager driving this car through many winters, of course, you know, it saw plenty of sideways action. So, and it's so controllable. Not to mention these awesome Bridgestone Potenza Sports, which just amplify the driving experience just that much more. Such a smooth powertrain. Very linear power up to the red line. Okay, AC's getting a little bit colder. Don't you love old cars, guys? Old cars are just the best. Talk about character that you don't see with new vehicles. Why are you stopping at the roundabout? It's not what we do. And that is a strong 215 horsepower. And when we get into the new car, we'll talk more comparison, but this does not feel that much slower than the new car, and that is for good reason. So this car weighs in at just about 3,200 pounds, whereas the new car is 3,800 pounds. And that is an all-wheel drive configuration. You can get two-wheel drive, but that only drops you 100 pounds down to 3,700. So even in a rear-wheel drive configuration, woo, the new IS is still 500 pounds heavier than the first car. Yeah. And there you go. We're going 65 miles per hour pretty much effortlessly. A pretty smooth ride in this car. The suspension isn't quite as soft as it is in the new car, but I like the balance in this car between softness and sportiness. Lexus had this so right with the first generation. I love this car so much. Easy to drive, easy to rev match. Easy to sweat in here. Heavy steering, pretty precise. And you get to listen to all that delicious 2JZ noise. Such a simple center stack in this car. 3 knobs, that's all you get. And they control everything you need, where you want your air to come from, your temperature, and how high you want it. Everything in this car, straightforward, right in your face. And look at this, it even has a cassette player. And it has heated seats, which, well, we certainly don't need today. But that's what I love about cars from this generation. These were the best driver's cars just because everything was so straightforward and usable. And you'll see in the new car that Lexus is still pretty good at doing that. They still have pretty good user interface, and they haven't gone towards just throwing away physical controls. So that's still nice to see. And that'll pretty much wrap up our drive here on the first generation car. I'm sure I'm leaving some things out, but I don't want to keep you guys here for 45 minutes while I drone out about all of the things about my personal car. What I will say is I've had very minimal problems, really just little tiny things and just, you know, maintenance items that I've had to do to this car to keep it going over the past 6 years. Next month will be 6 years owning this thing. That is crazy. But, you know, apart from the comparison, if you're thinking about buying a first generation IS300, do it. Absolutely do it, because I love this thing so much. Man, that new car is attractive. Look at that. Attractive in its own way, I should say. Let's pull in like this and we'll face them the other way. All right. Oh, also, check this out. There's a spot down here. Get some airflow in here. There's a spot down here with a spot for your cell phone. Lexus could see into the future and know that we were going to have phones that were exactly this size. How about that? Another thing, it still makes the same noise when it locks and unlocks. How cool is that? Let's go ahead and hop into the 2022. Actually, it's a slightly different tone for the new car. It's a little bit softer. Let's go ahead and start this up. Let's go ahead and get our cooling elements going. Keep this GoPro nice and cool. I'm not sweaty at all, as you can see, and it's certainly not 97 degrees out. It is a hot one today, folks. So getting into this new car immediately, obviously you notice that it is 20 years newer, but also, like I said, we still have this very usable interface in here. We still have a clock, and while we do have a modern infotainment screen, we still have a physical climate control panel. We still have a volume knob. We have a little mouse down here that we can control our infotainment with. We have physical controls for our drive modes, and we have buttons for snow mode and traction control off, which I failed to mention in that car, but it's in the same configuration. We also have a snow mode and a track off button in the old car. Heated and cooled seats in this car. Of course, you couldn't get cooled seats on that car, but they do offer it now. Quite a sporty feel in the new interior here. It's a little bit more sporty, I guess you could say, than the older car, but still works on the same sort of thesis of the first generation IS. Still a sports sedan for the masses, a sports sedan that won't give you a headache with maintenance and reliability. So I think it's nice that Lexus still produces the IS. Okay. We're gonna start with one thing that I don't like, and that is the turn signals. They don't click into place. And I don't understand why manufacturers do that, because I quite like to have a turn signal that clicks down. It's just that much more satisfying to operate, but anyways, not super important. And while we do still have a smooth powertrain in this car, the V6, you're really lacking on that low down torque. When you're just cruising in third or fourth gear and you put your foot down, you'll notice this thing has to drop quite a few gears in order to actually get you into the power band. And while it makes a decent sound, I don't like the sound this makes as much as I love the sound of that naturally aspirated 2JZ. We'll pull out on the road here and we'll put it into sport mode, and we'll let you guys hear what this 3.5 liter V6 sounds like. And again, you don't really get that torque until about 4,000 RPM. It's pretty dull until then. And while steering feel at pretty low speeds in this new IS are light, once you're actually in a corner, it weights up nicely, and it actually reminds me quite a bit of my car. But I will say, you can certainly tell and feel how much larger this new car is. So power is sent through a 6-speed automatic in this car. There is no longer a manual option. And while the thought of a 6-speed is probably quite prehistoric, I don't mind it. Now, would I like it to shift faster? Probably, but it's not, it's not awful. It'll still rev match for you and everything. What impresses me most about this current generation IS is how comfortable the ride is. We're also driving a Cadillac XT4 this week here on Daily Motor, and I drove that around a bit yesterday, and then yesterday night I got into this IS, and I was just like, holy crap, I cannot believe how much smoother this sedan is than, this so-called Cadillac SUV. All right, let's get into oversteer and see how it handles this. Yeah. Nice and tight through there. So just touching on what I said about a minute ago, it amazes me how smooth yet usable the suspension in this car is. They've got it dialed in pretty well. You can certainly feel the weight of this car around corners, but I think that the suspension is dialed in as well as it can be to just be so smooth for daily driving, yet, it's pretty nice in the corners. And not only is this interior still very usable, the quality in here is pretty impeccable. There are no rattles, there are no creaks, there are no squeaks anywhere. And it's the same way in the first generation car. Prior to my Lexus IS 300, I had only ever driven American cars. It was my first Japanese car, my first foreign car that I had ever owned. And one of my first impressions of that car, and just one of my favorite things, was just how high quality everything felt in the interior. And even for a 19-year-old car, nothing in my Lexus creaks squeaks, rattles. It's insane how well put together those cars were for their time. And you know, you get in a Mercedes or a BMW from that generation, there are parts that creak and squeak and rattle, and you just don't get that in the first gen IS 300, and you certainly don't get it in this current generation IS 350. If you press on things in this interior, oops, as I activate something, if you press on things in this interior, nothing really makes any noise. And you know, I hate to say it, if you press on things in a new BMW, sometimes you get some squeaks and some creaks. So it just goes to show that Toyota, Lexus, they really know what they're doing. And sometimes it means that they run a little bit far behind. You know, my Lexus has a cassette player. In 2005, it still had a cassette player. There were no BMWs that had cassette players, but the Lexus takes their time with things. And, well, this has a CD player, and it's a 2022, so what does that tell you? Sure, they know their market, whatever, you can make that joke that these cars are driven by old people, but quality takes time. You cannot rush quality. You can't rush perfection. And Lexus and Toyota, they are testaments to that. And, you know, for that, I would always recommend a Lexus IS. We're going to try not to run over the CrossFit people here. Hello? There, they are running. Anyways, okay. Let's go ahead and pull this up here next to the old car. We'll do one last little walk around with, you know, my last sort of final thoughts. And, well, that'll wrap it up for us today for our comparison. Less of a, you know, buying comparison, more of a just watch me go and drive the oldest car and the newest car. Kind of form your own opinions and, you know, let me know, which one do you prefer? Obviously, if the keys to both of these were sitting on a table, you'd choose this because it's worth about 5 times as much. But there's something about this old car that is just satisfying. You have that enthusiast DNA. You can tell that the engineers were destined to crush the BMW E46, and in my opinion, they certainly did. It's a timeless design, it's a sweet powertrain, it's just a great overall car, even though my headlights are a little bit faded and need to be polished. But the overall design of the car has just held up so well. Whereas the new car, the same sort of idea. It's a great alternative to a BMW 3 Series, a Mercedes C-Class, an Audi A4. It has all of that performance, but you still have the Japanese reliability. You still have that peace of mind. And I've got to say, the design on the new car is pretty eccentric, whereas the design of a new Audi or a Mercedes, they're not quite as crazy looking as this Lexus IS. So there you have it, guys, a back-to-back drive of a first-gen IS to a current-gen IS. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope some of this information has been useful, you know, coming from an owner of a first-generation car. But even if the information wasn't useful, I hope you enjoyed just kind of hanging out with me and driving around in these Lexuses today. So that'll wrap it up for us. Thank you guys all so much for watching. If you have any questions about the first gen IS, feel free to DM me on Instagram. I'm happy to answer any sort of buying questions about this car. And I'll tell you that I would certainly recommend either of these cars to purchase for anyone because they are both great. So again, thank you all so much for watching. This has been Christopher Brower here with Daily Motor, and as always, drive on.